and welcome to today's webcast. My name is Jake Freevold, and I'm in charge of product marketing here at Fulcrum. And today we're going to talk about how to fix your field to office data pipeline. And to do that, I always like to have a goal that we would like to target. And the goal in this case is pretty straightforward. It's what the title says. We're going to understand what the current field to office pipeline is, how it breaks down, why that breakdown happens, and then think about what to do about it. And to do that, we'll just start with a little bit of gaining perspective, understanding the position of the people in the office who are trying to manage that field pipeline. We'll think about the technological problem that surrounds it, and we'll discuss some solutions. And at the end, I'll talk a little bit about Fulcrum, take questions, all that kind of good stuff. So with all that in mind, let's get started by talking about enterprise asset management, not about the field at all per se. I've stolen this definition of EAM, or not really a definition, but a description of EAM from IBM's Maximo website. Hopefully they don't sue me for copyright infringement or trademark infringement, but it basically gives you an idea of what they're trying to accomplish with Maximo. They're delivering dashboards and analytics, so we can think about the data that they are trying to use to manage all of the assets in an enterprise. And they automate workflows within that process, within the asset management space that they're working in. And they do that to make a centralized operations hub for planning, operating, and optimizing what? Asset and facilities tasks. So again, we're down to processes and what kinds of processes we're engaged in. So, and this is true across the board for most any EAM solution. You'll see something like this. And the only change I've made here with the Maximo description is I put things in bullets that they did not have in bullets. So I'd like to take those ideas, what they're trying to deliver to someone whose responsibility is asset management, and put it in these terms. They, because they are a platform for the asset management team, will help the asset management team standardize the data and processes that are used in order to do asset management, customize that data and those processes in order to help optimize exactly what's going on. Now, there are a number of reasons that you might do this. You might customize certain processes because they are field assets specifically that you're concerned about. You might customize those processes because there are some assets in California and you treat them in one way because California regulations are like such and such, and some of them are in Nevada or Oklahoma or something, and they're going to be slightly different because the regulations are different in those states, right? So the customization of the data and the processes to manage the business use case that they're engaged in managing those assets. And finally, to integrate with other software and hardware, you need to integrate with GIS, for example, so that you have a location for all of those assets. You might need to integrate with field service management, a field service management platform, so that the field teams know which work orders to work on and what priorities, and are able to then organize the actual work processes that are going on. So I'm going to come back to these three, the standardize, customize, and integrate, because I think those are really important. They are part of what a platform does. It's the very definition of a platform. The business process owner, whoever owns that business process, has a platform that helps them plan, execute, and optimize their business processes by doing these three things. So I want to keep that asset management perspective. I'm not using the field worker's perspective. I'm keeping that asset manager's perspective for a few minutes as we talk about what their responsibilities are and the kinds of requirements they have to meet those responsibilities. So there's my asset management platform shrunk down and shoved off to the left-hand side as we look at some of the actual physical assets. I'm going to keep it really simple here. I'm just looking at, in this case, some of the steel transmission towers that are out there crisscrossing the countryside. If the requirement of the asset management team is to take care of these assets, they are going to have to do a number of different kinds of tasks, including, for example, getting line sag data. If they're putting up those towers the first time, then they will sag those lines as the initial state. Over time, they may have to come back and make sure that the line sag is such and such, and they'll do inspections to make sure that happens. But line sagging might be one of the things they do in order to make sure that those assets are in their proper working order. Inspections, generally speaking, how do we make sure that, for example, there's no vegetation encroachment in dangerous places, or to make sure that there's no excessive rust on the towers, that sort of thing. So inspection data is another thing that they're going to need. They're going to need to get repair and maintenance data. If there is excessive rust, what do they do about it? If there's a cracked insulator, what are they going to do about it? They have to repair those things. They have to maintain things either in a predictive or a planned kind of a way to make sure that they're going to keep those assets in good working order. And of course, vegetation management gets done, but they need proof that it happened. You know, we're worried about wildfires, so we want to make sure that there are no danger trees leaning over toward a line, which is then going to cause a spark that causes a fire. So we need to not only do the work, but we need to prove that we've done the work. So there may be some of that kind of, yes, I did the vegetation management work around that asset in the EAM. So these are the kinds of data that an asset management platform might work with on a day-to-day basis. And the business owner of the asset management processes may use certain specific kinds of technologies to help them do that, like drones to get overhead views of the vegetation, let's say, or to do an automated scan for insulator damage and that sort of thing. They may also use different kinds of sensors. So could check to see if there's a voltage drop in a certain area, or there's excess current flowing, that sort of thing. They could see that kind of, they could use that kind of sensor to make sure that the assets are behaving as expected. And of course, they're going to send out people to do the vegetation management to make sure that those are also, that process is also taking place as appropriate. And then once they've got that data, once they're able to show that they are doing all of the right things out there in the field, they are going to do some reporting and analytics around there. Reporting might be something as simple as compliance reporting. Look, I have to do the following inspections. The following inspections were done. Might be that simple. It might be something more sophisticated, like how do I make sure that I'm actually optimizing the usage of these assets out in the field, or how am I optimizing the maintenance process by which these assets are maintained. So there's a number of different kinds of reporting and analysis that might come out of the EAM as well. All right, setting that stage, how do they actually make sure that this stuff happens? And now we start to think about field people. They've got to give tasking to the field to do things like perform. I'm no longer talking about data. I'm no longer talking about, you know, nouns that we use to describe what we do. I'm talking about actions. I need to perform an inspection. I need to perform an installation or repair or do some maintenance. I need to perform that vegetation management work. So now I want to think about that field worker who, in the context of the EAM team, is there to provide them with the information that they need, right? The field worker is to some extent an asset of the EAM team. Now, the field team may feel somewhat differently about that, but there's no doubt that the EAM team is one of the field team's primary customers, internal customers. So let's then think about what that field worker needs to do. And I'm going to get rid of all the other clutter and just think about what flows from the field worker once they get their tasking back into the EAM application. And I think it's enough to talk about two different kinds of information that comes back. One is data from data collection specific processes, right? So this is where people think about data collection tools. And Fulcrum calls itself a data collection and process management platform, in part because so many people talk about data collection. Any inspection is inherently a form of data collection. But there are a lot of things that people do out in the field that are not inherently data collection. Slinging a wrench to be able to tighten bolts on something is not a data collection process. Stripping away rust is not a data collection process. Doing vegetation management is not a data collection process. So what we need to get from there is proof of work that these other processes were done correctly, right? So we say, okay, well, did you tighten the following bolts down with the following amount of, you know, foot-pounds of torque or whatever it is? Did we get the information initially about the vegetation management we wanted to do, send people out to take care of that vegetation, and then cut down that danger tree or whatever it might be that we had to do. So the proof of work that we did the right thing and we did it to specification is also critically important for the EAM team to gather, so they really understand what the state of those assets is. With all that in mind, then, how does the field person who is an asset for the field, for the EAM team, or the EAM team is a customer of that field person. How does that field person give the EAM team, that office-based team, the information it needs from the field? In other words, what's that field to office data pipeline looking like? Very, very often, the first thing that we've done, sometimes because we've been around that long, sometimes because it's just the way we've always done it, is we collect information on paper and then transcribe that into the EAM. I think we all know that there are problems with this, but we also all know that this happens on a regular basis. The data quality tends to be somewhat poor. There are misspellings, there are coffee spills, you're not sure how to read what you wrote, and so you transcribe a 1 as a 2 instead, or something along those lines. The latency is bad. You've got the data that you collected. Sometimes it takes a day or 2 or 3 to get that information back into the EAM itself. The auditability is poor because in order to say what's the real value there, you've got to go look up something that was hopefully stored in a file cabinet somewhere or a binder so that you can go and access that information. But you may not find it there. It may have been misfiled. Who knows? It's difficult to manage that information. And ultimately, this leads to a lot of frustration, which is challenging for the field worker, and frustration on the part of the office worker who depends on the field worker, and a lot of long hours for that field worker, because if that information is not going to be highly latent, then it's going to be something where the field worker has to, go back to the hotel or go back home or wherever it is and enter in all that data after hours. You want to burn all the daylight you can, so you go back after it's dark and go and get on your computer and start putting that information into a spreadsheet that then gets uploaded. And we all know that that's a challenge. So, and by the way, there's also on the bottom left, you see not only the clipboard, but also a camera. So they might have to associate pictures with the data. So what are they going to do? They're going to upload pictures to Dropbox and then connect the picture to the right record. Very challenging to do. One of the first things that people do once they have started down this road and they know that they want to get away from paper and transcriptions is they'll digitize, quote unquote, using spreadsheets. And the challenge here is that spreadsheets really aren't that much better than paper. If anything, they're a little bit more limited than paper. So theoretically, they save you some, but they're also challenging to manage just because of the limitations inherently in them. The data quality can be really bad. We have a customer at Fulcrum who, before she came to Fulcrum, was doing inspections of malls. I know it's not an electricity or a water use case, but she was doing inspections of malls for insurance companies, right? So the report that she generated would go to an insurance company so they could make sure that the risk of that mall was sufficient for what they were underwriting. And somebody, latitudes and longitudes are just strings of digits. Somebody swapped the latitude with the longitude on one of the records, which placed one of the malls out in the middle of the ocean. And nothing will make an insurance company freak out more than noticing that one of your malls is in the middle of the ocean. They suddenly don't trust any of that data. So the data quality is almost as poor, and it leaves people with a very low confidence in that data. The latency is almost as high. They still got to type the stuff in with their fat finger it in. They've got to upload it at the end of the day when they get back to the hotel. So the latency is almost as bad. Might be a little bit better, but not by much. The auditability is better because generally these spreadsheets can be stored somewhere, and it's easier to set up a process by which they get by which they're easier to find. So for example, you upload a spreadsheet to a certain location. From that location, you pick it up and upload that into Maximo, for example. Well, when that happens, good, because you've now got a copy of that spreadsheet in the right place. So the auditability is definitely better. Not awesome, but it's better. But you still have that frustration in the long hours, right? Because they are dealing with stuff that's complicated, not built for them, not very productive for them, and ultimately difficult for them to work with. Also, now they're still correlating the photos that they do with the record. It's just now that they're saying, okay, well, here's the URL for that photo, and they're putting it into a spreadsheet. Very easy to transpose things, get data wrong, et cetera, there as well. So what people do after they've gone through that process for a little while is they will say there must be a better way. And one of those better ways that's offered by the EAM vendors is an EAM-specific mobile app. And this is a much better solution in many respects, right? Because first of all, it's built by the Office team to satisfy the needs of the Office organization, but it is designed specifically to help the field give them higher data quality. right? You're going to capture data. There's going to be some validations in there. It has that knowledge about what the EAM process is built into the mobile app. In addition, it typically has much lower latency because if you have a connection, it's going to push that information back to the EAM platform, potentially on an inspection by inspection basis. So the latency is much lower. And the auditability is now superior to anything you got with paper or spreadsheets, right? It's something that you saw the record, you may have seen exactly who was using it when that record was collected, you know the time at which it was collected. So it's got much, much better auditability than you had with the other methods. Having said all that, you still get frustration and you still get long hours. And we need to talk about why that is, because that's going to help us understand why the solution that we have, the things that get in the way of our field to data pipeline are still there when we use these individual mobile apps. And the way that I want to introduce the reason for that is to focus on the woman on the right here, the one who's actually using the tablet or the mobile phone to be able to communicate with the office about the things that she's doing. Because at a minimum, she has not just the EAM to deal with, but she has something like a safety management system or some others. We'll talk about that more in a second. So when she has to do the work that she needs to do for the day, she starts off maybe with a toolbox talk. Well, the information in that toolbox talk is captured in the safety management system. And now I'm going to be a little bit ridiculous here, right? Because I'm going to show work that would not be done by the same person in the same day. But these are the types of work we talked about going to EAM. So we'll continue to use those as examples. There's a toolbox talk starts off with the SMS, and then when you're doing an EAM task, you got to do things like get line sag data, which you're now going to enter into the EAM. And then you have to do a vehicle check because you're about to drive somewhere, and then you get inspection data once you have driven there. There's a lockout tagout because there's a piece of equipment that is energized and you need to shut it down appropriately and make sure that you don't get hurt before you do any additional work, such as the repair that you might do or an installation of another piece of equipment or something like that in that location. And then you've got to go back to the SMS to make sure that you are using the right PPE when you are doing vegetation management. So this person on the right-hand side has to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth between the EAM and the SMS because the EAM is built only for the EAM team. The Enterprise Asset Management team built that platform to help standardize their processes and to customize and optimize their processes and to integrate with other platforms. But it doesn't help the field per se. I'm going to move this woman out of the way. I'm going to take away those bullets just to declutter a little bit. Let's talk about the specific things that the person faces when they're out in the field. They're going to be getting redundant information because there's shared data between the EAM and the SMS, right? The asset management platform and the safety platform. There's redundant data collection. Who's doing it? What truck are you using? What assets are you actually inspecting? For what customer? That sort of thing. There are, however, going to be data variations in each of those apps. Maybe there would be a requirement to capture very specific information about a transformer, and that's what goes in the asset management platform. And the safety management system only cares if it's high voltage or low voltage. So there's going to be data variations, and the user, the field worker, has to know about those data variations. The apps are going to behave somewhat differently, so that user needs to be trained on multiple different apps and the ways that they behave and think, basically. There's compatibility and version control issues with each of those apps. You can think about, for example, if you're using an iPhone 16 or something like that, and the EAM requires you to use an iPhone 17 or higher, and the SMS allows you to use an iPhone 15 or 13, well, then you're going to have a difference of capability that needs to be managed for the user to be able to use both apps on those phones. Just the sheer context switching, just as they're out there in the field doing their work, thinking about this thing, and then they got to pull themselves out of it and think about that thing. That kind of context switching is a drag on productivity. And then finally, there are, when you have a process variation, that can be based on the enterprise app that you're dealing with. Let's say, for example, that somebody on the field side wants to add a video walkabout of a pad-mounted transformer in order to see what it looks like. Is there already rust on the outside? Are there signs of rodent infestation? Are there signs of encroachment of vegetation? That sort of thing. So just do a video walkabout. Well, are you going to ask the EAM team to do that? Because the EAM team honestly doesn't care. That's not something that's going to end up in the asset management platform, because it's not really an asset management issue. What is an asset management issue is yes or no. Is there, are there signs of rodent encroachment? But do they need a video? No, that's really something that only the field team benefits from. Similarly for the safety management system, the issue isn't getting a video into the system to show that. The issue is just, the transformer safe as you're starting to work on it? So who's going to make that change for them? Who's going to accept the burden of making a change for the field team to give them that video walkabout that's going to make the field team more productive? Probably nobody, or if they do, it's a favor. So because of those kinds of issues, there are often long waits for updates in the EAM mobile app and in the safety management mobile app. There are requirements, you need to get things done, but you can't get them done because you're low on the priority list for those developers on that team. And that ultimately means you're often going to revert to paper. And this is one of the reasons, we've heard it over and over again from clients, one of the reasons that they have so much paper is that things simply aren't flexible enough for them to convert everything to a digital platform. And getting rid of those bullets now for a second so I can get rid of the clutter again, I wish it were this simple, but it's really not. If I shift the SMS over to the side here, I'm going to throw in some other different kinds of platforms, all of which are different corporate systems. One of them is GIS. I put that closer to the EAM because they seem to be more closely related. There's a lot of data redundancy between the GIS and the EAM, right? There's a lot of redundancy there. So people will use a GIS tool to capture information and an EAM tool to capture information. Both of those mobile apps are very frequently in the hands of a field worker. There could be a quality management system as well, and there could be an ERP that's helping to manage these processes. So here we are. All of these platforms were put in place for a very good reason, and that is that each of them has a business owner, some kind of business process owner, who says, I need a way to standardize my data and processes. Good. Customize those data and those processes in order to make sure that I'm able to handle all of the different variations that happen in my business, and integrate between the platform I have as a business process owner and all the other business process owners out there. So I would integrate the EAM with the GIS to make sure that we've got good two-way information flow. One of them is a system of record for some of the information, the other is a system of record for the other information, but they share a lot of that information regardless of who is the system of record. And now I've got 5 different mobile apps that I have to think about when I'm going out to the field. Let's take those mobile devices away and instead think not in terms of the mobile devices themselves for just a moment, but think about the steps that I have to execute in any given process. And what we find is that, and again, this comes repeatedly through discussions with our customers, what we find is that there is never a single place where I'm going to execute a given step. Step 1 might look like it's mostly an ERP step, but in fact, I need some asset information that I really should be getting from the asset management platform because that's the system of record. And I've got some specific geospatial information that I need to get from them. And that's before I start work. And now I need to capture information, either inspection style data or proof of work data, and I need to push it back to those systems as well to show that I've done the job that I need to do. And because they're not able, well, there's a couple reasons, but they're not able to be flexible enough for the field worker to get everything done the way they need to get it done, or the data is redundant, so I want to capture it one time and not have to flip back and forth between different kinds of mobile apps. I will capture that data on paper, transcribe it into a spreadsheet, upload that spreadsheet, and then from there it will flow into a process that does integration across those 3 different platforms. So even one step can be very complicated, and that's just one step. So where is the field able to plan, execute, and optimize its field-based business processes? Right now, generally, there is no single place for the business process to be managed. which means your field to data pipeline is dependent on this extremely complex, extremely siloed environment, and it's highly, highly fragmented. That is an absolute recipe for inefficiency in the field, so it's going to cost you more, take you longer, that sort of thing, and for poorer data. Your data quality is going to be lower, and by data quality I mean a number of things. Your data completeness is going to be lower, the precision that you get is going to be lower, the latency of that data is going to be lower, higher. And as a result, you just have a really inefficient way of managing the field business processes in a way that's responsive to those other business partners that we have in the enterprise. So one of the things people think about as they look at a problem like this is they say, well, what do I replace? Clearly, I'm doing something that isn't efficient enough. And one of the things that you're talking about, Jake, is these individual mobile apps that are out there. Maybe I should replace something there. I think we need to be careful about how we think about this. We're not trying to replace the enterprise platforms. The business owner still exists, and therefore the business owner still needs a platform, right? So the platforms that we have are performing their function correctly for that business owner and the office-based teams that use them. It's only the field tools that I'm interested in replacing to improve performance. I'm not going to rip and replace like Maximo to improve the performance. It's not a Maximo problem per se. The field tools are designed to give the office-based teams what they need, but they're not designed for that field productivity, though, and that's the issue that we face when we're dealing with the situation that we just saw. So maybe the field system is what we should be replacing. And there we have to ask ourselves, what field system? The field frequently doesn't have a system to replace. They don't have a place to create the processes that they need to standardize those processes, to customize or optimize those processes, and to integrate those processes. Instead, they're making do with a bundle of different tools from office platforms. And that's one of the root causes of the poor field to office pipeline, data pipeline that we're seeing. And as I've said before, when they can't do what they need to with the tools they're given, they'll go back to paper. They're more than comfortable with it. They've seen people multiple times come in and say, we're going to change the world, and the world doesn't change. And instead, things are just more complicated. So they go back to what works, which may not work well, but it works, and it's paper. So I'm not interested in talking about any kind of a rip and replace on the field side. They actually need what others what others already have. They need a platform because that is going to be what makes them productive. So give them a platform they've never had, and suddenly we have a place where we can start to really improve the performance of the field teams. So if you look at the complex environment that I described at the beginning of this, it gets replaced by a single platform that is able to take each of those steps and all of the different elements of those steps and incorporate them into a single process. And we will pull information where we need to from those different systems to give context, and we will push information back to those systems as each task gets done. I'm going to just drill down on that a little bit because I find that people get a little lost in the abstractions there. And this is abstract too, but it goes down a level deeper. I'm going to talk about Fulcrum as a field system of record. This is your platform for the field. And there are certain kinds of field tech systems that are out there, such as drones and sensors and things of that sort, 3D cameras, whatever you may have, things that you bought in order to make sure that the field gets the information that it needs. And then there are the enterprise systems, the enterprise platforms like the EAM and ERP and safety management and so on systems that we've talked about so far. Before you go out into the field, before your team goes out into the field, they need to be able to pull information from all the appropriate places. Drones have, video or imagery of the places that they've flown over. There might be a snapshot of that information to give context to the field worker. The GIS platform provides the location data and the related information about that location, the parcel of land they're on, who the owner of that land is, et cetera, et cetera. The asset management platform says, well, this is the transformer that you're specifically going to be doing some maintenance on. Here are its characteristics, here's its maintenance history so far, and here's what you should expect from it. The field service management platform is going to provide the tasking to say, okay, well, I've got the work order coming out of the EAM, and now I'm going to manage the teams and send them out. I'm going to roll out the trucks to make sure that they get there on time. So I'm going to pull all of that information into the field platform before anybody steps foot in the field that morning. And then while they're in the field, they have a ton of work that they need to do in order to execute the processes that that are required for the field to do. So there may be sensor data. One of the things that I like to show on demos, I'm not showing a demo here today, but it's incredibly easy, for example, to just call a weather service. And so when you open up Fulcrum on your phone, you know, the first thing that happens, you open a new record, and the first thing it does is it pulls down your local weather. Why? So that you can see it's, you know, 32 degrees and sunny, as opposed to people saying, well, it's kind of chilly. You know, that low quality data that doesn't give you a good sense of what's going on. Higher quality data like that can be useful for almost anything. It also could push out alerts to people. If you see that there's a fence down at a substation, then we want that alert to go out right that minute. So you can do that in activity. And you can also make dynamic GIS calls, assuming you have a connection, which you don't always have. But if there's a way to talk to the GIS to get information that you don't currently have, then you can make those kinds of calls in activity as well. And then finally, let's say you're done with that record, not necessarily with, you know, you're done with that activity. You're not necessarily done for the day, but you're done with that activity, your pad-mounted transformer inspection. Then I need to be able to push that information back to wherever it goes. I'm pushing it back to the GIS saying, here's the latest date that we did an inspection for this asset, and it was what we expected to see. The asset management platform gets a little bit more detailed data. It was this transformer, I did the following activities, and it was, you know, again, at this location, et cetera, et cetera. Notice the duplicate data is not a problem now because Fulcrum is the one pushing that data out to each of those different platforms on its own. Data lakes are incredibly important, or data warehouses, whatever kind of architecture you're choosing to use. All of that accumulated data to help you create the dashboards, do the analytics, that sort of thing, you can push out to that. And of course, field service management needs to know, yeah, the truck rolled and now the truck is back, so I'm done with that activity. All of those things need to get information from the field worker as the field worker accomplishes each task. So prior to activity, in activity, and post activity, we are interacting with different kinds of platforms as necessary, but the focus is on what makes the field team productive in conducting those tasks. This is not something people have talked about a lot. That's why people don't have field platforms right now. It is a new market category in some respects. It's been recognized as such by Lynn Schneider, who's a research director at IDC. She does a lot of work on location and geospatial intelligence, and because of that, you might think, oh, well, she's going to be focused on the GIS side. No, she knows this. She knows about the importance of GIS, but she also knows that the GIS team is has a specific mission, and that mission is different from the field team. So having the ability to streamline field operations by giving them their own platform that's location enabled, but not a GIS tool or GIS platform itself, is something that's going to drive a lot of efficiency and flexibility across those field operations. And in so doing is also going to improve data accuracy and other forms of data quality as the field provides that data back to the other platforms that require them. So I want to, we've spent some time talking about how to improve the data pipeline, how to get better data from the field, but I want to address a buzzword, and it makes me a little crazy, I know, to address a buzzword all the time, but AI has become very important to people, and a lot of people want to know what's real and what's not. So I just want to spend a minute talking about what could be real versus what's, kind of pie in the sky, at least for the moment. And I expect a lot of transformation here, but I think what I'm about to say is going to remain true across the board. I could always be wrong, but I think this is going to remain true. We talked about having the multi-step process here for the field team. And each of these steps in the field process is collecting information and pushing information to and from, pulling information from, pushing information to different platforms. Where is the data about that process, the field process now, steps 1 through 5, where is the data about that field process stored? Where is the not just the individual data elements that you collected, but information about the process overall and the relationship of one step to another. Where is that stored? I've got to do a lockout tagout before I do the maintenance work. Well, where's the relationship between lockout, tagout, and maintenance stored? Where does that information live? That doesn't live in any single space. And it's actually, if you look at each of these individual platforms, it's actually worse than the picture that I just had up, because in reality, there are a lot of different places where that might live. There's an Access database that Johnny built, and there's an Excel spreadsheet that Jenny's been using to track things. There's a whole bunch of different elements that people are using to keep track of the work that's being done. This is especially true with organizations that have made acquisitions. I was talking to a client a little while ago, and they said, yeah, we've got an EAM platform for everything but water. And for water, we acquired a company. They had a really good water EAM. We like that process. We're not going to mess with it. So we've got 2 different EAM platforms. Okay, so you're going to have 2 different sets of processes, 2 different places where all that stuff lives. So if you look at any of the processes at the bottom of the screen and you say to yourself, where's the information that I need in order to apply AI to the process? The answer is you're going to apply AI across all of these processes in all of these different ways. And it's probably going to be AI from different vendors. IBM is going to use one, and Esri is going to use another, and Salesforce is going to use a third. So there's no consistency across the AI engines that are actually trying to use the data. And there's no place to go where you can look at the data from the field and the processes that the field used in order to really understand everything about that. Now, what I'd like to do is show you about a 2-minute long video. And I normally don't show videos during presentations, but I think this one's really worth it. It's about a 2-minute long video that shows where AI can go. And as you watch it, I want you to think about where all of the data is housed to help this AI do what it's going to do. The process data, the anomaly data, the ability to check and see whether there are anomalies or not, that sort of thing. I want you to think about that as you're watching the video. I should note before the video starts that the narrator here is theoretically the AI in Fulcrum. I've stripped out all the kind of marketing stuff, or almost all the marketing kind of stuff, and you're just watching what life might be like for a field worker who is using AI, where the AI has a complete understanding of the process and data. So with that, I would like to, let's see if this works.
Take a look with me at what the future holds when our field worker puts on his smart glasses with camera and microphone and gets started with his AI-guided experience in Fulcrum. We've arrived at pole 1734. Please look at the top so I can scan for issues.
Sounds good.
I've already guided him to the right power pole. Now I'll capture some information so he doesn't have to, still under his control, of course. No visible defects in insulators or other features.
I agree, log it.
I can help him remember what he needs to do.
Guy wire tension is good.
Okay, what about the guy wire covers?
Oh, right. Covers look good as well.
Got it. Ready for the pole itself?
Let's do it.
The pole tag should read 1734. It appears to be defective. Do you agree?
I agree. It's missing the 3.
Noted. Also, some cracking, but no major defects. Do you agree?
I agree. Log it. Hammer sound test.
There's more to all this than data capture. I help capture the right data with minimal effort, seeing what he sees, guiding him through the process.
Hammer sound is good. Probing below the soil line.
Just like I can help field workers with their jobs, I can keep the office informed of relevant field information.
Northern quadrant might need a second look. What's the SOP for reinspection below the soil line?
The manual says that potential defects should be reinspected and remediated within 30 days. Should I alert the office that pole 1734 should be reinspected using a shovel, along with a pole tag replacement?
Yeah, do it.
The pole's inspected, the status is logged, nothing was missed. This is the future of Fulcrum. We're creating an AI-guided experience for every field worker. Last inspection of the day. Hole 1735. 50 meters northward up this street.
Metal or wood?
Metal.
Sounds good. I'm going to put my belt in the truck and walk over.
You're due for a water break, too. It's 87 degrees.
Good call.
All right. If you think about what we just saw, there's a tremendous amount of information that's necessary for that. Oops, sorry. Okay. There's a tremendous amount of information that's necessary for the AI to do everything that she did. The fragmented process, for example, would not be able to consider the fact that the guy wire covers and the guy wire tension both need to be handled. That process isn't in any one place. It wouldn't be able to integrate the safety step that she took of making sure that he was fully hydrated on a hot day. She wouldn't be able to do that as part of the overall process. There are steps within this process that they should do, and this was a relatively simple process. If we were talking about something that was more complicated, again, like a transformer inspection, then the lockout tagout would need to be in the AI's mind, if you will, and at the same time that the process steps for the maintenance or inspection was also in the AI's mind, right? And she would have to know which area she should come first. Should she do the safety steps first, or should she do the inspection and maintenance first? So by having a field platform now, you know what the sequence of steps are. You know all of the steps that go into a particular process. You know the data within that process and what an anomaly would look like. If someone reads a sensor and says, okay, it's 32 degrees, the AI is going to be able to say, okay, but it's August and you're in Texas, are you sure? At which point the human can say, oh, right, I was reading a gauge, it's in centigrade, it should be in Fahrenheit. And she says, no problem, I'll convert it for you. That kind of thing can happen when the overall process is understood and the data is all understood in the context of the AI. But if that doesn't have one place to live, if that doesn't have the field platform to live in, then it also isn't going to be possible to really make that a reality for the field worker who's out there. So not only are you improving your field to office pipeline of data, but you're also making it possible by having that field platform, you're making it possible for the field to have more at its fingertips with respect to making its data better, making its process better, making its process more efficient. The field can do those things using the latest technology, AI or not, frankly, but you have a one place to go to make all of that work more effectively than it ever would otherwise. So I'm just going to take a few minutes now to talk about field. We are a field process management and data collection platform, and I just want to take a second or two to talk about that. The reason Fulcrum exists is because we see how often field teams struggle with the inefficient tools that they're given, and we see that those tools cause more frustration than help. So our goal is to reduce that frustration, and we do that by providing a field-first platform. Everything we do is field-first, and it boosts productivity and streamlines operations. You may question, what do you mean by field-first? How is that different? For example, then, when people apply AI in other platforms, one of the first things they'll do is say, well, I'm going to make it easier for you to build out a form or to build out to create your process. You'll be able to type in a prompt and the prompt will automatically generate a form for you. That's nice. I'm not going to say it's not nice. And in fact, our professional services people have a tool that does that. It's like, I get it. But when you consider the amount of time you save on developing a form, maybe that saved you a half hour. It's not hard to build a form. Maybe it saved you a half hour though. Compare that to the fact that we are focused on using AI in ways that's going to save a field worker, 2 minutes per inspection, and they're doing 400 inspections a week, right? Now all of a sudden I've got, it costs me $250 to roll a truck out. It costs me, the amount of rework that gets done, all that kind of good stuff. I'm focused on solving that problem and boosting productivity there, but before I think about what I can do to improve the productivity of the developer in the back office. Development process is very easy, and we made sure that it's easy. but the focus is making sure the field is as productive as possible. And the way that we do that is by really focusing on being that field first platform. And as I've said numerous times throughout this presentation, the platform's goal is to provide a place for the field teams to standardize their processes and their data, to customize their data and their processes to make sure that they're supporting the field requirements and making sure that the office requirements are also being satisfied, right? In order to satisfy the field, you've got to satisfy what they need and their customers, who are the office teams that need their data. And then to integrate bidirectionally with both the field tech that they use, like the sensors that we talked about and drones and 3D cameras and all that kind of good stuff, as well as the different kinds of enterprise platforms such as asset management, GIS, ERP, and field service management. So by performing those 3 steps, the standardization, the customization, and the integration, we're giving the field something it's never had before and making sure that it is much more highly productive than it's ever been before, and also improving satisfaction with the job, making sure that training is easier, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's just a huge advantage for the field to have that capability for it. And one of the ways that we see that capability showing through is the client impact that it has. When we talk to customers, we frequently will hear that every $1,000 they invest with us returns them $8,000 to $18,000 to customers. That is not a set of outliers. I've got, specific situations where I could point to where it was much higher than that. I've got some situations where it may not have been as much because maybe they were already highly optimized beforehand, but that's pretty ordinary to do that kind of, see that kind of return. And we do that by saving many employees many hours every day. Like, that's the goal. It's just make them as efficient as humanly possible. And that enables them to increase the capacity of what they do, or to reduce the staff that they have doing it, either contractors or full-time. So those things are what matter to us. When we can show our customers how they can improve their processes by using Fulcrum, that's really the end game for us. That's the major thing that we want out of everything. So what I'd like to do now, we've got about, looks like 13 minutes left in the presentation. I left tons of time for questions. I would like to ask if there are any questions out there. I'm going to see if I can pause my screen and stuff to make that happen. Nope, still sharing my screen there. All right, let's take the share off for now. I'd like to see if there are questions. Let's see if we can pop those out. Somebody asked, will it be possible to get a slide deck after the webinar? Yes, we're happy to share the slide deck. You can also get a recording. There will be a recording of this after the after probably tomorrow. By tomorrow or so, we'll have a recording that you'll be able to view for that. Another question is, there are multiple field organizations in my company. Sorry, I can't read all this. What if we can't get a field platform for all of them? There are multiple field organizations. Okay, so I think what you're asking here is, I've been touting the benefit, or the requirement really, to get a field platform where all of the data and all the processes reside for your field activities. And I do think that's very important. And I think what you're saying is that because there are multiple organizations, you're not sure that you're going to be able to get a single platform to do all that. Totally understandable concern. Just as a pragmatic issue, I've been working in software for about 30 years, and over the course of those 30 years, we've seen a repeated cycle where people in various business units are able to pick a certain kind of software. They will start to use a certain kind of software to be more productive, and as they do that, they will either immediately start to use the same platform across the organization. Like, somebody will say, oh, what are you doing, Ted? And Ted says, oh, I'm doing this. And they say, oh, great, well, I'm going to adopt what Ted is doing. So you'll see some of that natural expansion. Or you'll see different platforms picked up. There aren't many that do what Fulcrum does, but there are things that are kind of in adjacent markets that might be used as a replacement for the kind of work that we do in certain circumstances. So you might see them using Fulcrum and fast field forms or some other kind of form vendor. And what people will eventually do is they'll say, okay, well, this needs to consolidate. I've got too many different platforms that I'm working with, and because I'm working with these different kinds of systems, I got to standardize on one of them. And at that point, you'll compare us to these other kinds of tools. You will say, you know, I don't have the GIS in that one. I don't have the robust customization capabilities. I've got, you know, fewer integration points with that one or whatever. And you'll come up with a list and you'll just consolidate on one. So don't worry too much about getting a field platform for all of them. Worry about standardizing and customizing and integrating processes for one team. Just focus on that one team. And once you're able to do that, then the results start to determine where you go when you ultimately consolidate your field teams on a platform. I hope that helps. I've got a question. So how far away is Fulcrum from being able to fully support the AI-assisted workflow featured in the video? I really actually appreciate you asking that question, Jason, because I should have said as the video ended that this is not a reality yet, okay? I like to say that, you know, Sam Altman needs to catch up to us, and Facebook, Meta needs to catch up to us, because the vision that we've got is beyond what their capabilities are. From an AI standpoint, one thing that we definitely learned over the past, call it 2 years, is that AI both moves faster and slower than you think it will. We have, for example, had some capabilities. I'm thinking here about our audio fast fill capability, right? Where you talk into your phone, and it's not like voice to text where it goes into one field. It's voice to data, if you will, where you talk and it understands the context of your form. And as you speak, it will fill out all of the areas of that form in any way that it needs to be filled out, right? So it understands your context, understands what you're saying, acts more like a human scribe would than what you normally think of as voice to text. That was really good as an initial proof of concept. It was amazing as an initial proof of concept. We tried stuff and it just worked. But then, as people started trying it out in the field, we discovered that in certain ways it wasn't robust enough for the field team. So we actually had to do a lot of work to bring it up to what it is today, which is a really, truly robust solution for the field. So now we're looking at things like the glasses, right? The Meta glasses that my friend Landon was wearing in that video. Those Meta glasses are not yet at the point where they are robust enough for the field work of the type that we were showing there. The integration points between those glasses and any platform. This is not a Fulcrum platform problem. This is you know, integration between Meta glasses and anybody else. It's not robust enough yet to be able to do all the stuff that we showed there. We are currently in talks and have been in deep development work with both Meta and with Google for their VR glasses capabilities. They're not there yet, and they know that. They know that it's much more like a commercial kind of thing than it is like a, pardon me, much more like a, that's what I'm looking for. It's more like a consumer. That's the word I'm looking for. It's much more of a consumer technology right now than a commercial technology. So we're a little ways away from that. We do have a roadmap for it. I didn't show it today, but for example, we've already started doing things like the audio fast fill, which is, you know, a foundation layer for being able to interact with Fulcrum by voice. We have a photo fast fill capability, which is in beta. So when you saw him look up at the top and say, you know, just basically allowed the AI to take a picture and see if there was a problem with the transformers. That technology, that kind of technology is in beta right now. And we're seeing a lot of kind of robust use cases around that. The anomaly detection and process management side of things are a little bit further out there. The fully integrated picture is a little bit further out than that. So we are well on our way in our roadmap to get to that vision. That vision will probably change a little bit along the way because technology does, and we will. But we are actively making inroads to that, both from a technological standpoint and from a conceptual standpoint, to get that AI-assisted workflow in place. So thank you for the question, because I really should have said this isn't real yet when I exited the video, and I didn't do that. So thank you. Sorry, got to remove these. I'm having a little bit of a glitch here. I apologize. My screen is acting up. Okay, it looks like I'm saying, okay, here's a question. I thought FSM was the platform for the field. I thought field service management was the platform for the field. So let me clear up just that acronym a little bit. So what does field service management do? It's got field right in the name, and it looks like it's the kind of thing that should be a field-oriented platform. And that's a little confusing because in most ways, it's not really a field-oriented platform. It is the platform that's used by a field operations team that is responsible for rolling out the trucks to take care of the work. So if you use a field service management platform like Salesforce has one, I've done kind of a deep dive on that a little bit, you will find that it talks about scheduling and automation, and there's a great deal of work done there. It is not, generally speaking, as detailed about what happens once the truck stops rolling and gets to a location, and then they need to start doing the work that they need to do. It doesn't build in all that integrated capability about safety management and quality management and pulling the information from EAM and getting the stuff to the GIS. It doesn't do all of that detailed work in the field. So it sounds like a field platform. I get that, but it's really for the team that manages the orchestration of what happens in the field, but not for the person who's standing in front of that transformer, that front of that pole, or in front of that pipe. It's not for that person as much, and that's why Fulcrum is separate from an FSM and a platform. Somebody wants some follow-up, and thank you for that. We'll definitely be happy to follow up with that offline. Does Fulcrum have any capabilities for equipment management? We currently have different apps for safety, equipment management, and payroll in addition to Fulcrum. Yeah, I mean, so there are a number of things that we can do. If you've got apps for safety or equipment management, it may be that those apps are custom built or homegrown, and you could move them wholesale into Fulcrum. Depending on the size of company, I've seen us basically take over the role of that kind of application. That is going to be something that is a little bit more of a custom build, right? Because we're focused on the field, and then this becomes, okay, equipment management, there's more done there. So that becomes a little bit more of a custom build for us. Having said that, if you're a company of a substantial size, then what we would mostly do is take the apps that you probably have for safety and equipment management and payroll and integrate with them, especially if they have a good API. Then most often you'd say, okay, well, I've got the following team. They were out there. This person was working for X number of hours. That task was associated with this client, and I'm going to push information back about the task, the hours, and the client to the payroll management system, and then the payroll management system manages that. So we need to talk a little bit more. This is to Hannah. We need to talk a little bit more about the specific use case you've got, the software you've already got in place, and whether it would make more sense to build something with Fulcrum at its center, or whether it would make more sense to have Fulcrum integrate with the things that you already have. And sometimes it's a combination of both. It depends on size of your business, complexity of the apps you got, whether they're homegrown or whether they're off the shelf, commercial off the shelf, that sort of thing. So not a complete answer. They say that if you're a consultant, your answer is always, it depends. It does depend here a little bit. I'm not a consultant, but it does depend here a little bit. Happy to talk to you about those specific use cases. It looks like we are about out of questions at this point. So if there are any last ones, please feel free to enter them, and I'll jump on it as soon as it pops up. But it looks like we're out of questions at the moment. I'd just like to thank you all for being with me today. It was, an hour that you could have spent doing something else, and I appreciate the fact that you found this valuable enough to spend the time with us today. If you're interested in sharing this, then, like I said, there will be a recording of this up within the next day or so, and we'd be very happy to have you do that. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to talk to you about it. I'm always interested in talking to customers or prospects and seeing what they're interested in doing and what their use cases are. So in particular, very happy to have that kind of outreach. Thank you very much, and at this point, we will conclude the webinar. Thank you.